A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, the love of Christ impels us. Once we have come to the conviction that one died for all. Therefore, all have died. He indeed died for all, so that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. Consequently, from now on, we regard no one according to the flesh, even if we once knew Christ according to the flesh. Yet now we know him so no longer. So whoever is in Christ is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, new things have come. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Hallelujah, 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 Speak, O Lord, your words of everlasting knowledge. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the first day of the week, Mary Magdalen came to the tomb early in the morning while it was still dark, and saw the stone removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and told them, "They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." Mary stayed outside the tomb weeping, and as she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet where the body of Jesus had been. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus there, but did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" She thought it was the gardener and said to him, "Sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you laid him, and I will take him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop holding on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them, I am going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and then reported what he told her. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, good morning. I can see on some of your faces that you've done the Sunday readings and we've kind of lost our minds because these aren't the Sunday readings. And I assure you what we're doing is fine, right? We've got our patronal feast this weekend, right? And so we're allowed to take the Feast of St. Mary Magdalene and apply it to Sunday. We get to change the readings and do all sorts of fun things as we celebrate our patron, St. Mary Magdalene. And what a beautiful patron and she really is for us. And as we hear through these scriptures, just how beautiful her life really was with the Lord. And as we enter into this feast, as we enter into this celebration of St. Mary Magdalene, I think it's only fitting that we spend a few moments talking about a completely different saint entirely. St. John Paul the Great. He's one of my favorites. For those of you, I'm sure most of you know who he is, but just in case you don't, he was the Pope. He died right around 05, 06, and was just this incredible man. He lived an incredible life. If you don't know much about him, please do look him up. He's really, I think, one of the most incredible people to have lived in the last few hundred years. But there's a story that I love about St. John Paul the Great. He's one of the most well-traveled popes in all of history. And the people who were in charge of setting his itinerary and making sure that he was getting to the meetings that he needed to get to and things, they all kind of got together at one point and they made this agreement. It's like, whenever we're going somewhere and there's a chapel there, don't tell him. Because he's going to go into the chapel, he's going to spend too long there, and it's going to ruin everything that we've set up for him that day. And so they had this agreement that we just don't tell him about the chapel, which I think is just kind of funny in itself. But there's this great story of he was in this building, and there's this tiny little chapel that had no markings, not even a window on the door, and they had to go down the hallway where the door to this chapel was in order to get to the conference center or meeting room where he was going to have this meeting with people, and they're going down this hallway, and again, we don't tell him about the chapel. There's no markings. Everything should be fine. So they're going down this hallway, and he stops right by that door. He looks at the door, and he looks back at the people who are telling him where to go and what to do. He just goes, and then he goes into the chapel. And he ruins the whole day, right? Because he spends too long there and everything gets ruined. But I love that story. I love that story for a number of reasons. And I love it especially, and I think it's especially pertinent. It actually does make sense that we talk about it today, because the same thing that draws John Paul, the same thing that drew him into the chapel, is the same reason why Mary Magdalene is outside the tomb. Everything we just heard about that gospel is actually summarized in that story of John Paul II. Right? Because what draws them both, why John Paul is so moved to this chapel that he can't even recognize by any exterior markings, what draws Mary Magdalene to the tomb, what draws both of them is love, right? And it's a love that goes both ways. They both know deeply in their bones that they are loved and saved by God. And because they've encountered that incredible depth of love, what they've done with their lives is that they've said with their whole lives, I'm going to love him back. That love that I've received, I'm going to love him back. That's why John Paul could tell that there was this chapel there, even though there was nothing saying that it was a chapel, because the one he loved was there in the Eucharist. It's why Mary Magdalene is drawn to the tomb, Because even though she thinks he's dead, this is the last place that she remembers. The one she loves is here. And it's part of why she's so upset when she finds the tomb empty, because she still doesn't really understand what's happening. And it's also why, as everybody else leaves, she stays. I think it's remarkable that she's there alone. It kind of reminds us of what just happened 3 days later. Or 3 days earlier, at the crucifixion. Right? The 12 all leave. Except for John, right? But she's there. She stays by the Lord. She stays with the one that she loves, with the one who loves her. And she finds herself there alone, just longing and searching and crying out for the one that she loves. And because her heart is so moved with that love, the one she loves finds her. Right? Jesus actually answers that cry from her heart. She just longs to be with him again. She just longs to be in his presence with the one that she loves, with the one who loves her. And it's interesting, right? It starts in almost this anonymity, right? Jesus doesn't reveal it right away. He says, "Woman, who are you looking for?" And Mary, in her desperation, right? It doesn't really make any sense that the gardener would be moving dead bodies out of tombs, right? That's a very unreasonable thing. But she's like, "I think it's the gardener. Maybe he knows. Maybe he did something. I don't know. But I'm so desperate. I'm so desperate for the one that I love. I'm going to ask anybody who comes." And so she thinks it's a gardener. Like, if you've taken him, if you know what's going on, tell me, and I will take him. I will have him back. And then in an instant, in one utterance of one word, right, as Jesus says her name, Mary, everything just falls into place. And she understands now that she's with the one she loves. And then this kind of funny scene actually happens where Jesus actually has to tell her, like, "Stop holding on to me," right? I've got more work to do. I've got work for you to do, right? And she becomes the first person in all of human history to be entrusted with the message, Jesus has been raised from the dead. Right? That's the pinnacle moment of the good news, the entirety of the whole gospel, and everything that the Lord has ever been trying to do since Adam, right? All of the covenants, everything has been leading up to this one moment. And here's Mary Magdalene. She gets to be the first. She gets to be the one who takes that message to the 12. She gets to do it because she loves. She gets to do it because her love drew her and wouldn't let her go. Right? It's that same love that draws John Paul. And brothers and sisters, that same love is available to you and to me right now. Because it's the same Jesus. Right? It's the same Jesus who encounters Mary Magdalene on this very first Easter morning. The same Jesus that draws John Paul the Great as he's walking by that tiny and lonely chapel. The same Jesus is right here in our tabernacle and will be right here on this altar in a way that you and I get to receive into our very bodies. The encounter with that living love is here. And it's available in this insane abundance. Jesus holds nothing back. And so as we come to the Lord of love, as we come to the resurrected Christ, as we come to the one who draws Mary Magdalene, who draws John Paul the Great, Let's let him draw our hearts too. Right? And let's ask him that he might increase that same love within us, that as we encounter him today in this Eucharist, that he would make that love real and tangible, that he would make that love strong and unbreakable, that he would continue to draw our hearts closer to him. And then as we encounter that love, right, let's ask for the faith and the courage and the grace to imitate St. Mary Magdalene. Because just because she was the first to be entrusted with that message has now been entrusted to everyone who would call themselves Christian. Right? The message, the good news, that Jesus is alive, that love has not died, but that love actually conquers the darkness of the tomb, and that his light and life is available. And it's available in full. So, brothers and sisters, let's ask for those things, especially as we remember how our beautiful patron of St. Mary Magdalene, right? Let's ask for that grace to imitate her in love, to imitate her in faith, to imitate her in courage, right? Can you imagine how intimidating it might have been to be the first person to ever have that message? And have to go to the 12 apostles and have to say, like, I've seen the Lord? Right? Let's imitate her in all those things. In her love, in her faith, in her courage. Understanding that as we are drawn by that bond of love, right, that our faith and courage, and as we share that good news, right, we don't do it on our own. But that the one we love, the one who loves us, he answers that same cry of our hearts, right? He answers it for Mary Magdalene. He answers it for John Paul the Great. He answers it for us. That we don't have to do it alone. That love actually is real and available. And that today, at this very Eucharist, we can be drawn once more into that incredible bond of love. And as we ask the intercession of St. Mary Magdalene, and maybe even ask the intercession of St. John Paul the Great, why not? He's good anyways, right? Let's ask for these two heroes of the faith, right, to intercede for us, that we might imitate them, again, in love and faith and courage, and so enter into that same position of being with the one we love.